revolution is taking place at the forefront of genetic research. Extraordinary techniques are now available, where faces can be reconstructed from DNA, even from a drop of saliva. Used by law enforcement in crime scene investigations, they can now create portraits of suspects, such as these. This technique has been used to solve a number of cold cases already, and has led to a number of arrests and convictions. This isn't science fiction. This is now reality. The decoding of our genome has now entered a new era. Up until recently, most genetic analysis only looked at a very small part of our genome, just 2%. And the remaining 98% was referred to as junk DNA. But now, advances in technology have led to remarkable discoveries in these mysterious regions of our genome, originally called junk.
It's not garbage. In fact, it's treasure. And there are things that are coming out of all those parts that we didn't pay attention for.
Coffee, enjoyed by so many around the world. Whether coffee can be beneficial for your health or not might also be determined by the 98% part of our genome. So coffee could increase or decrease your risk of getting heart disease, depending on your genetic profile. But there's more. Our genome could also be holding the keys to longevity, even if you are a lifelong drinker or smoker. It's becoming clearer that the secrets to a long life may be due to special DNA that protects us from disease. So experts are now starting to unearth DNA that has protective effects against cancer and dementia. For this documentary, we teamed up with leading scientists from around the world to capture DNA as has never been seen before. We've uncovered the remarkable workings of the mysterious regions of our genome that's been kept under wraps until now. So join us on this treasure hunt today as we delve into our body's genome. Rapid advances in DNA analysis techniques have now given us an extraordinary weapon. It is being used in police investigations which have produced remarkable results. And this technology is called forensic DNA profiling. From DNA evidence collected at crime scenes, such as from cigarette ends and strands of hair, tiny amounts of genetic material can be analyzed and used to predict the suspect's face. In Louisiana, this was used to solve a crime when all leads had been exhausted. A homicide took place here in 2009.
This is where we found her body, right here in this area.
Nothing was found at the scene of the crime, but a fragment of skin from the suspect, recovered from the victim's nails. DNA was extracted from it. But there were no matches with previous offenders on their databases, and the case went cold for a number of years. But 6 years later, an astonishing piece of technology became available. A way to predict facial features just from DNA.
But could have blue eyes. My point is,
Once this image was released, People came forward with new information on potential suspects, and eventually, the perpetrator was caught.
I mean, we feel strongly that had it not been for this technology, we may still be looking for a killer right now.
To date, this technology has already helped to solve over 20 cases in the United States. This is no stuff of science fiction. But how are such things now possible? A global authority on DNA facial profiling is based in Shanghai at the Chinese Academy of Science. This is Professor Kun Tang. For this film, we enlisted the help of the professor in an experiment. For this exercise, we asked a Japanese actor, Ryohei Suzuki, to take part. We wanted to see whether his facial features could be recreated just from DNA in his saliva. Professor Tang and his team were only given a DNA sample with no further information on the actor's identity. Professor Tang made the discovery that the keys to our facial features were being held in the 98% part of our genome. Take nose height, for example. If you change even just one part of DNA in the 98% part of our genome, it can change dramatically. Let's do the same with the jaw. It makes such a big difference to someone's features. So how did the team get on with reconstructing Ryohei Suzuki's face from DNA alone? Take a look. Analyzing genomes to this extent had not been possible before with the older techniques. So what does all this mean? Moreover, what's the difference between genes and DNA? Our bodies are made up of around 40 trillion cells, and DNA is contained in every cell. This may look familiar to you, the unmistakable shape of DNA's double helix. Our genes are in fact only a very small part of our genome. Even when you add them all up, it only comes to about 2%. Genes are tasked with an important role to make things that are necessary for our bodies. For example, they act like instruction manuals for making various molecules to create organs in our body, like the heart, stomach, gut, and so on. As for the remaining 98% of our genome, those that are not genes are called non-coding DNA. These don't contain instructions on how to make up our body parts. So in the past, it was assumed that they had no function and were called junk. However, due to dramatic advances in DNA sequencing, these regions that had been written off as junk can now be analyzed. And this at last has allowed us to get further insights into the complex workings of the human body.
我们最开始的时候认为，几个可能跟人脸的发育相关的基因，把它进行测序，我们就可以把这个人脸复原出来。现在来看的话，它的那个问题的复杂性远远超过我们的想象。
According to research, there are over 10,000 sections of DNA that relate to the shapes of our faces. Decoding these parts of our genome has now made it possible to reconstruct faces in such detail. Within the 98% of our genome that used to be called junk, it now appears that a vast amount of information is packed away in here and is playing a key role to make us all unique. Scientists working in medicine around the globe are making rapid progress to delve further into our 98%. And that is because vital information concerning our health and longevity may be buried within it. Studies have been looking into the genome of the elderly, especially those that are in good health and are aged 100 or over.
My name is Richard Arvin Overton. I am 109 years old. Still walk, I still talk, and I still drive.
Richard Overton has been a lifelong smoker since he was 20 years old, but is still in good health. Louise Levy is 108 years old, has never exercised, and is partial to her daily tipple.
I have red wine every evening. I didn't do anything physical, really.
These habits in most people are considered harmful to health. However,
They did what everybody did, and they did it quite wrong.
the secrets to their longevity may lie in the 98% part of our genome.
That they have some mutations that cause them to age slower and to be protected, therefore, from the effect of aging on age-related diseases.
In 2019, scientists published their findings on DNA variants that can protect our lungs from tobacco. Normally, smoking increases our risk of dying from lung disease by as much as 3-fold. However, these variants may be dampening down inflammation of the lungs from tobacco and reducing the risk of getting lung disease by as much as 80%. One after the other, DNA that can protect us from disease is now being discovered. For example, DNA that can enhance our powers to ward off cancers, DNA that can suppress Alzheimer's disease, even DNA that is linked with the onset of allergies. Like DNA that holds the keys to our longevity, these are all buried amongst the non-coding 98% of our genome that used to be called junk.
Many of those variants in the non-coding part of the DNA are very effective mimics for drugs that we might use to treat disease.
So I think there's a whole field of biology now that looks at those areas, and I think those areas will be promising also from what we find that can help us to target aging, to delay aging, prevent it, and maybe reverse it.
But this non-coding region of our genome, how is it different to genes themselves? And what does it do? Recent developments in research have revealed that the 98% of our genome works by acting like a controller of our genes. And what do we mean by controlling our genes? We'll be getting to that by showing you what the latest research has told us about this remarkable mechanism. And surprisingly, this involves coffee. Coffee is one of the world's favorite beverages. globally, over 20 million cups of coffee are consumed every day. Science is now revealing how coffee can bring about health benefits, but only for some.
Well, there have been many studies in the past that have looked at the health effects of coffee, and the findings have been really inconsistent. Some studies showing coffee increases your risk of certain diseases, others showing no effect, yet others showing coffee might actually be protective.
Antioxidants that are found in drinks like coffee can be good for you. For example, by rejuvenating our blood vessels and improving the health of the heart. But on the other hand, caffeine in coffee can shrink blood vessels and raise blood pressure, which in turn can put a strain on the heart. So it looks like people who are able to reap the benefits of drinking coffee are able to write off these negative effects of caffeine. How do they do this? Professor Ahmed El-Sohemi has analyzed the DNA of 4,000 people, and he discovered that the 98% part of our genome held the keys to this. There is a piece of DNA that determines our ability to break down caffeine. He found that 46% of the people in his group were able to rapidly break down caffeine. And so they were able to fully enjoy only the beneficial aspects of antioxidants. Since they have DNA that allows them to rapidly break down caffeine, their risk of a heart attack can be vastly reduced by just drinking 1 cup of coffee a day. And if they drank over 2 cups of coffee, this can even decrease to 1/3. In the remaining 54% are people who were slow to break down caffeine, and those that are considered neutral, neither fast nor slow. It's now understood that in those who are only able to slowly break down caffeine, coffee can put a strain on their heart.
So depending on which version of this genetic variant a person has, which is found in the 98% of the genome that does not code for a protein, this ultimately determines whether or not coffee is good for them or bad for them. So when we looked at the DNA of these participants, we were pleasantly surprised at just how big the effect was.
So let's see how our genes are actually being controlled by DNA found in the 98% of our genome. Molecules which are responsible for breaking down caffeine are crucial here. And instructions for making them can be found in the 2% part of our genome, our genes. And the molecules needed are made by scanning through the instruction manual, which are contained inside the gene. Each and every one of us has this gene. But in people who are able to break down caffeine rapidly, the non-coding 98% part of their genome contains a DNA variant, which makes their body able to make plenty of those molecules to dismantle caffeine. And in people with DNA variants that break down caffeine slowly, they are unable to produce enough of those molecules. We'll now explain what DNA in the 98% of our genome is up to inside the body cells. Let's see how it is able to manage such incredibly complex functions, like scanning through instruction manuals, and even controlling the number of times they should be read. For this program, NHK collaborated with leading scientists from around the globe to visually demonstrate the workings of our DNA. First of all, let's take a look at some advanced microscopy and see how they have captured DNA. We are looking at inside of a cell, as seen by the very latest electron microscope. DNA is packed inside the spherical nucleus. Clearly captured for the first time ever, this is what DNA actually looks like. And now we are inside the nucleus of the cell, which is smaller than a fifth of the finest grain of sand. What does the world of DNA look like in here? In addition, we have also collected the first ever images of DNA in living cells caught in 3D, and simulations of DNA's movements in the nucleus. Basing our efforts on the very latest scientific findings, we have recreated the world of our genome in state-of-the-art CGI. Using coffee as an example, let's go on a journey to witness the dramas about to unfold. Taking center stage is the liver, our body's organ that breaks down caffeine. The world inside the nucleus is about to be revealed. We're now inside a cell in the liver. The spherical structure you can see is the nucleus, only 1/100th of a millimeter across. Packed inside here is our DNA. A lot of openings are visible on the surface. Let's take a look inside. This is what DNA actually looks like. The double helix is in fact shaped like this. Almost 2 meters worth of DNA is packed away very tightly in the nucleus, which is smaller than a grain of sand. And in this clearing right over here, that area highlighted in white is the region of our DNA involved in making the molecules needed to break down caffeine. Here in blue is the instruction manual, the gene. And the area highlighted in pink is the region that used to be called junk. Let's take a closer look at this area formerly known as junk, the non-coding 98% part of our genome. We're looking for DNA that determines our ability to break down caffeine. And it's right here. Something's approaching it. This is a molecule that acts like an ignition switch. This switch is closing in on the edge of the gene shown in blue. And hits it. Let's take a look again. And this sets off a chain of events. This here is like a scanner that takes in information from the instruction manual. And streaming out from it is a copy of those instructions. Rather than copying DNA in its entirety, it's just copied only the relevant parts from the manual. Only those parts that relate to the molecule necessary for the breakdown of caffeine. So once the crucial parts of the instruction manual have been read, the copy makes its way out of the cell nucleus. Tools and ingredients needed to make the necessary molecules for the body are based outside the nucleus. And here comes the device that will make it. It reads information from the copy of the instruction manual. And then it starts producing the molecule to break down caffeine. And when caffeine comes over, it's taken in and broken down. when we drink coffee, caffeine is managed like this inside our bodies. So let's see what happens to caffeine in people who are able to break down caffeine rapidly. The number of strikes increases. And as a result, molecules needed to break down caffeine are produced in greater numbers. And that is why caffeine can be broken down quickly. This microscopic world, which sustains our lives, is astonishingly precise. Its actual workings are only just starting to be unveiled. Our bodies are constantly up to remarkable things. This system isn't set up like this just for caffeine. It also applies to the production of various molecules that are needed by the body. For example, to make cartilage for our noses, to suppress cancer, or to hold back allergic reactions. We now understand that the 98% of our genome is controlling the levels and timings for making these molecules, based on information kept within our genes. The unraveling of the 98% part of our genome, the region responsible for individual differences in constitution, is starting to signal big changes in the world of medicine. You often come across claims such as, "This is good for your health," or "Take so many grams of this vitamin or nutrients daily to be healthy." Drugs dosage for treating diseases is also set according to an average body type. But when you consider that there are individuals with different DNA types, you begin to realize that these so-called ideal dosages perhaps ought to be different for each body type. And there is a good possibility that the keys to these may be found amongst the 98% part of our genome. There's even more to this astonishing story, and it's to do with mankind's remarkable diversity. On Earth, people are capable of living in altitudes well over 4,000 meters, as well as in the extremely harsh conditions of the North Pole. We are the only mammals capable of surviving in such a wide variety of environments. Professor Rasmus Nielsen's research focuses on the genetic analysis of people from around the world with remarkable physical abilities and solving the mysteries around human evolution along the way. He discovered that in people who live up in the Himalayas above 4,000 meters sea level, where oxygen is 40% less, have DNA that allows them to increase oxygen levels in their blood. And in the Inuit people who live in the Arctic, they have acquired DNA that protects their blood vessels, despite eating a limited, high-fat diet of seals and fish with few vegetables. The keys to these resilient qualities have all been found in regions of our genome that had originally been called junk. Next, we're moving on to a story about how the 98% part of our genome has produced astonishing abilities. And we've traveled to Indonesia to find out more. People here have lived above the ocean for generations, having abandoned land for some centuries. They are sea nomads, also known as the Baja people. These people have an incredible ability not found anywhere else in the world, a superb ability to dive. They free dive to hunt fish in crystal clear waters. And they are capable of staying underwater for over 10 minutes. They can reach depths of around 70 meters. And as much as 60% of their working lives can be spent underwater. Keys to their special powers could well be found amongst the 98% part of our genome.
One of the genetic variants.
It was Professor Rasmus Nielsen of UC Berkeley who analyzed this in detail too.
These genetic variants in the non-coding DNA is what has allowed the Bajo people to have this extreme diving capability.
Professor Nielsen's team analyzed the DNA of over 40 Baja people. And buried amongst the 98% part of our genome, he uncovered DNA that was involved in making a particular organ in our body larger. Our spleen. The spleen acts as a storage device for red blood cells which carry oxygen. So when our oxygen supplies are depleted, red blood cells are sent out around the body. When the Bajaz people's spleens were measured in the field, and when they were compared with people who lived on land, they found that the Bajaz spleens were on average 1.5 times larger. This is caused by the mutation that makes their DNA special. It's believed that the Baja may have ended up with bigger spleens, as they carry DNA that is able to produce large amounts of molecules needed to create the larger spleens. The diving capabilities of the Baja could have been triggered by a mutation which had occurred unexpectedly in someone long ago. But consider this. If the DNA that influenced the spleen to become larger had been passed down, but if that child never saw water, diving talents kept in their DNA would have ended up buried like lost treasure. But if it became necessary to dive for their survival, people who carried this unique DNA would have had the upper hand and ultimately would have been able to produce more offspring. Our tale of remarkable people continues in Chile, high up in the Andes. One of the defining features of this region is water. The water here is extremely toxic. In fact, it varies between 100 and 1,000 times over the recommended safety levels. Professor Bernardo Ariaza has studied the mummified remains of people who had lived in this region from over several thousand years ago, He found that people lost their lives at a young age due to arsenic poisoning.
Y hemos encontrado que estas antiguas poblaciones ya estaban contaminadas con niveles de arsénico, en algunos casos bastante altos, ¿no? Lo que vemos es que hay una alta mortalidad infantil, las primeras momias son fetos y recién nacidos.
But people are still living in this region today.
Y muchas veces tomamos agua del río, pero eso nunca nos afectó, nunca nos afectó.
Yo, claro, pues, hay el arsénico y todo, pero hasta el momento no he tenido problema en cuanto a salud.
En términos de los sistemas de salud actuales, es que esos niveles son casi incompatibles con la vida. Entonces es muy sorprendente que la gente que ha vivido ahí haya sobrevivido, haya resistido estos niveles de arsénico.
Experts from the University of Chile analyzed the villagers' DNA in detail. And they discovered that buried in the non-coding 98% part of their genome were sections of DNA that enhance the ability to detoxify arsenic. This was possible as their DNA allowed their bodies to make larger amounts of enzymes so that arsenic could be detoxified.
In almost all of the cases where we looked at recent human evolution, what we find is that the genetic variants that have changed us, they almost always fall in the non-coding regions. It's almost always mutations that sit in the non-coding part of the DNA.
It's now thought that in most cases, we manage to acquire these kinds of new, remarkable abilities due to mutations taking place in the 98% part of our genome, which control how our genes work. You might think that all this may not be relevant to you. You couldn't be a carrier of any special kind of DNA. But you'd be wrong. You may not be aware of this, but in fact, we all have the potential to contribute to humankind's diversity. You could be the source of a new ability for mankind. Fascinating revelations have been made from research taking place in Iceland in the North Atlantic. Leading the world in genetic research, a project has been running to collect DNA samples from its people with the aim of advancing medicine.
I donated around 2006, if I remember correctly.
Yes, many people have done it, and including me, and I believe that this is good for the future generations to be able to research, have this opportunity to research the DNA.
A global authority on genetic research, Dr. Kari Stephenson has collected DNA samples of over half the population of Iceland. And by analyzing the entire genomes of thousands of sets of parents and children, he discovered something truly remarkable.
When we are conceived, we receive half of the genome of our mother, half of the genome of our father. But in addition to that, we are born with about 70 new mutations, mutations that are not found in our parents.
At the moment of fertilization, our father's DNA and our mother's DNA become intermingled. It had been known for some time that mutations were likely occurring here, appearance of DNA that is not present in the father or the mother. But according to this latest research, it's been found that everyone is born with around 70 new mutations. and most of these were to be found in the non-coding 98% part of our genome. So even just over one generation, new abilities could potentially emerge due to these 70 new mutations, none of which were present in the parents.
Non-coding DNA harbors a lot of genetic variation, and if you suddenly have to adapt to a new environment, that's where the substrate that natural selection can work on, that's where it comes from.
Hello, hi.
With each birth, 70 new mutations are created. It is essentially a system that gives us the best shot at survival, despite challenges from our environment. So, potential new abilities might be waiting inside of you, too. A project has been running to find people with special DNA, genetic superheroes that live among us. Professor Stephen Friend is a researcher based at Oxford University.
Very nice to meet you. In some ways, think of it as a decoder ring, a sort of resilience decoder ring that we're going to try to build.
He is looking for people who are resilient to disease by searching biobanks around the world which hold tens of thousands of people's DNA.
Pull them back a little bit by those. We do a lot of studying of those who are sick and building up long lists of altered components. But maybe if what we're trying to do is to develop therapies for prevention, maybe what we should be doing is studying those who don't get sick.
There have already been cases where an individual's special disease-free DNA has gone on to save others around the world. Here is one such genetic superhero. Paula, who is married with 2 children.
Hello, Paula.
Hello.
Hola.
Hola.
Paula appears completely normal, but her DNA is very special. Her superpower? Resilience to diabetes. People with diabetes are unable to properly metabolize glucose, so their blood sugar levels remain high. So what could be happening in Paula's case? Paula's special DNA was uncovered by Professor Joaquim Calado.
Once again, the originality about Paula is that it is such a clear-cut phenotype, that she, in fact, was losing and still losing a lot of glucose.
There are molecules which enable glucose to be stored in our bodies. In the past, it had been thought that this was essential for storing energy. However, Paula's extremely rare DNA means that she is completely unable to make a key molecule. So instead, her body doesn't store excess glucose, and it expels it quickly. Paula is living proof that you can live healthily, even without these molecules.
This is also, Paula is very unique in the sense that, okay, what can I do using the knowledge from her DNA, from her physiology or physiopathology? What can I learn from that data in order to improve her condition?
By using clues from people such as Paula, game-changing treatments have been developed by pharmaceuticals. This drug has now been approved in over 90 countries worldwide and is saving countless diabetic patients who had been struggling with other medications.
いかがでした？血糖値もですね、187から110近くまで下がってますね。劇的ですね。
This patient has been suffering from diabetes for over 20 years. But because of this new drug, she no longer has to worry about added complications, such as heart disease.
E assim disponibilizei-me, assim como das outras vezes, pronto. Sinto-me satisfeita e sinto-me também ao mesmo tempo especial, porque ao fim e ao cabo isto não é toda a gente que tem o que eu tenho, pronto, e sinto-me bem, pronto.
Research being led by Professor Stephen Friend has been unearthing more genetic superheroes.
So on this screen, these are the 13. These are what we were waiting to find to see whether they were none or several. And here is that list.
Professor Friend has discovered people who have the genetic hallmarks of disease, but are entirely healthy for some unknown reason.
No disease, no disease, no disease.
With genetic diseases, it had been thought that due to a mutation on a single gene, disease was inevitable. However, despite having the mutation that causes these genetic diseases, there were 13 extraordinary people who were completely disease-free. It is possible that these people were born with remarkable DNA in the 98% part of their genome, which may be protecting them from the onset of disease.
These are the individuals that have those hidden genetic treasures. How exciting! One of them was around individuals who had HIV and did not go on to get AIDS. These individuals had no idea that they were special. There may be these unrecognized genetic superheroes, and I want to find them. We need you. We need you to step up, because in you are those hidden treasures that could help humanity.
The hunt for treasures in our DNA is now taking place all over the globe. Priceless information with the power to change our future is being uncovered from regions of our genome that had once been called junk. And cutting-edge science is unveiling the world of genetics, which supports life. Our genome's 98% contains a world of humankind's limitless capacity for diversity. And even conceals powers that could save people's lives. And many more treasures are still waiting to be found. You too may have such undiscovered treasures within your DNA.